So thank you very much for joining. This is the platform leadership track. So thank you for having with us next 45 minutes. The topic of today, of this session now, is joining the platform revolution, or the platform revolution. We're super excited to have great speakers here and to share insights from company's perspective, from an ISV perspective, and also from Autodesk as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dexter from the Economist unit, who is going to lead this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Welcome back. I hope you've all had a good break. So we're going to keep talking about AI in a slightly different way with you three guys. So it's quite interesting. Last week I was at our Economist Quantum event. And a lot of people, yes, I know, quantum. And a lot of people were kind of convinced by quantum, but it was kind of the same discussion in terms of we want to do it, but we still see the barriers to entry. We still see the need for value proposition. We still need to have that, basically that gap bridge between the two. And I think maybe our discussion will be kind of around that. How do you demystify that kind of, all those new technology we're talking about, which can be a bit scary for an awful lot of business leaders. What's the best thing to do? So we'll kind of be discussing that, and we'll probably be discussing also a bit about agents, because that seems to be the word of the conference. Bonus point if you mention Jarvis, then I'll make a Black Sabbath joke, and then nobody will laugh, but that's fine. So we're going to be discussing those three things. So I'm going to ask you the same question first, and you can all introduce yourselves just in case some people don't know who you are. But I think it'd be quite interesting to start with, you've all got like a bunch of consumers in the room. They're all kind of interested to see what can be done. So my question would be, what can consumers actually do today? And Michael, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, hello, everybody. I was not in the earlier sessions. I'm Michael Fleischman, one of the co-founders of OpenSpace, excuse me, a company in San Francisco. And we are an AI company. So to answer your question, I think quite a bit you can do right now with AI. My company has a technology that creates Google Street View-like models for construction sites for purposes of photo documentation, basically many advantages of that. The way it works, though, is all based on AI. And so essentially, the technology works. A customer will walk around the job site with a 360 video camera, and the AI will look at every frame of video that's coming out of that camera and pin it to the location on the floor plan where it thinks that the user was when that frame of video was taken. And so you get this very nice, Google Street View-like environment, but what's really happening behind the scenes is you're kind of creating a search engine for those images, but you're searching through space and time. So you can open up your floor plan and go to Unit 1A, and you can see, what it looks like today and yesterday and 3 months ago. Now, what we've been doing for the last few years is playing with generative AI to enhance that kind of spatial AI. So taking that search index, and now instead of just space and time, we're also adding the ability to search by content. So like what is actually happening in the images using AI that is available right now. And we're launching this product, I think it's just in a couple of weeks. And so now you can open up a floor plan, and instead of going to Unit 1A, you can say, take me to Unit 1A and show me what it looks like before the drywall was put up. And it'll zoom you to those locations. Similarly, we're also playing with agents. And so we have our first agent, which is now in beta, which is a kind of note-taking agent. Essentially, you can walk around the job site, and as you identify issues, you can describe those issues to the note-taking agent, and that agent will not only transcribe that for you, but actually start to fill in the fields of your issue, who it's supposed to be assigned to, watchers, and it'll kind of kick off the workflow for you. And so I think the future that we're excited about is when you start to kind of bring those together and you start to have the agents that are now operating on the search index and starting to kind of watch and see as things happen to kick off those workflows automatically. Now that is not there yet, but I think that's the future we're all pretty excited about.
Yes, and we'll probably discuss a bit more of that later on in the discussion. Andy, what about you? What can consumers do today?
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everyone, and for those of you who weren't here in the first session. So my name is Andy Palmer, and I lead the technology field teams at AWS, responsible for our strategic accounts business. This is a small but very important group of marquee customers, all of whom you know by name, products and services you use daily. Obviously with folks like Autodesk here, but think of the likes of Netflix and others. I think by and large, some of the world's most advanced and innovative technology companies for sure. And to no surprise, I've spent the last 4 years of my life, I think, just almost dead-centered in this space around generative AI and trying to help guide our customers in our industry and our service teams down this journey to make sure that we're providing a level of service and capability that are going to help transform your own businesses as we go into the future. And so the mix of customers that I work with, it's super broad. And so the use cases, like mileage varies. It's really all over the place. And just maybe cherry pick a few. You look at a company like Adobe, right, and what they've done with some of their products like Firefly, which is using generative AI to totally transform the way that the content and media is being created. Photos and videos are also being edited and manipulated in like super easy to use and intuitive ways. And for those of you who've never used some of those products, like it can be pretty overwhelming the first time you log on. And I'm sure there's probably some Fusion products, et cetera, that would be similar to that as well. We've got customers like LexisNexis that are out here who've built generative AI products to now help lawyers understand law and code and to accelerate their outcomes as they get ready for court cases and court dates. And they now charge for this product called LexisNexis AI Plus. So there's one example of now we're charging a premium level of service for this. There's other companies like TurboTax, my former employer, who's responsible for 50% of the United States tax revenue, has introduced generative AI to help customers better explain and understand their tax situation throughout the entire course of preparing and filing for taxes. And then, for every one of those, there's probably a dozen customers who are trying to reimagine things like their contact centers and cost centers where maybe it's historically been invested in as a cost center, or there's a lot of people and a lot of tasks in there that can be automated, and even using agents for sure. We're seeing that just across the board, and that's thematic. And then the other one's really obvious. We touched on it a little bit earlier today. Is some of our customers like Cursor and others who are starting to transform the way that code is being created as well is super exciting. And I think we were talking about this earlier. That one is doing so well, generally speaking, because we've got years of history of understanding how to inspect and manage and perform regression testing and unit tests. So what you're shipping is going to be reliable and by and large and solve your customer problems. And so in some ways, it's kind of much safer way to unleash the intern army, however you want to call it, of agents to go do some of that product development work. So really just a full spectrum of multi-modalities, and now more and more with voice that's coming, and we've got a new model that's coming here soon that will literally do any to any modality. So you can take video and speech to text and vice versa, both directions. And so these newer modalities are going to, I think, unlock even more use cases and possibilities as well.
Thank you. And obviously, last but not least, Ben, what can consumers do today from your perspective?
Yeah, so hopefully I'm Ben Cochran. I run a group called Developer Enablement for Autodesk. And a big part of that is the third-party developer community, but also part of that is internal to Autodesk. My team looks at our tooling for how we build things at Autodesk more effectively. And the big thing I think that's happening in the beginning is reduction in toil. There's things that would be iterative processes that take a long time. Whether it's in an Autodesk product, we're looking at things that are tedious tasks or processes that take hours, months, sometimes longer, and we're trying to remove those, trying to make those just simpler. How do you get from that how do you get towards really an outcome-based intent? And I think that's going to be the big movement here, is that we're going to be able to focus on the outcomes that we want and have that conversation first. And then how we actually solve the problem is going to be something that we can instead of driving the machine will then engage in trying to, or helping us or partner with us on achieving those outcomes. And again, I think the beginning of that is removing or reducing the toilsome activities that we have to focus on across all of our industries. Like you used the Firefly example. I like Adobe. My wife's a graphic designer, and one of the things she loves is all these fill features that you get from Adobe products, because it's this toil. She spent so much time trying to fix that little element that was missing out of the photograph, and now she goes and she says, hey, here's what I need, and it does it, right? And she knows exactly what it's doing, but it does it right away. The same thing is true with a lot of manufacturing processes. When you go from manufactured models into drawing sets, and how do you remove the toilsome activities and get there faster? Again, leading to the machine coming back and partnering in those outcomes.
It's an interesting correlation hearing you describe it about its toil even in Adobe, and it makes you wonder, even in the context of creating code and like writing unit tests, at some point in the future we look back and go, oh my gosh, remember we used to have to write this line by line, or maybe we got a little bit of code completion, and you remember those days.
I love the coding examples, and I think the reason why the coding examples, for one, I think the community is excited about it.
That's true too.
But the process of testing the result, I think that's one of the things we have to get past, is that we were talking at dinner the other night about when does an agent or a system know when it's wrong? Right now, you probably have all of the same experience I have. Is the system got the answer wrong? Like ChatGPT, you say, hey, that's the wrong answer, and it's very polite. It says, oh, I'm sorry, let me get the right answer, only to answer wrong again, right? And it doesn't even know it's wrong, right? And so where's that validation? And that's why with software, we can validate. We have tests. That's the way we work. Is hopefully we're test driven in the way we build things. And so I think it fits into, there's a safety net in that, and that's a great example for how models even get trained. They go, oh, wrong answer. Okay, learn from that, work again. And so, yeah, I think that's going to be one of the pivot points in other workflows, is how do you know that it's not correct?
Because one of the ways it's playing out right now, right, is like one of the ways you can do that is just through simple constraint. So I'm going to have all these agents go out and do things, but I'm going to very much limit it down to where the point, maybe it almost even feels like an API call, right? But as time, that aperture can open up.
Yeah.
But this isn't anything new. We saw the same thing happening with the initial versions of models themselves, and you couldn't have a conversation. We were talking about this, Dexter, about a model. When we were first talking foundation models, like the next breath someone would utter would always be, oh yeah, but they hallucinate. That's still somewhat true to an extent today, but with better automated reasoning and grounding checks, and those things have become much, much better. But obviously now, having a system reply back to you and maybe say something it shouldn't say is one kind of consequence. Having these agents now go do something on your behalf, if you're not careful, could have a different set of consequences too.
Yeah, I will say I think the agents themselves as an approach is kind of, in some sense, a reaction to hallucinations, and which I personally still get a lot of hallucinations when we were talking at dinner about, I was trying to find a restaurant to get a herring sandwich. And I looked it up, and AI told me where to go, gave me the address, even told me how much it was going to cost.
Pretty confident too.
Yeah, and lo and behold, no herring sandwich at the place that I went to, and the price was wrong also. But the agent approach, I think, is compensating for that in some sense, because aside from just acting, which is, I think, a big part of agents, it's also about narrowing the focus, right? I think you mentioned. And that narrowing of focus allows you to put new guardrails around accuracy. Right. And I will say, the accuracy is always hard with AI products, and I mean, it's something that I've spent my whole career working on. And when you're doing AI for consumers, there's a certain amount of acceptable loss, especially when people aren't paying for something, right? Or they're paying through ads, and they're willing to put up with a mistaken sandwich recommendation. But when people are paying for stuff in a B2B context, they expect things to work all the time, and that puts a lot of pressure on the AI. And the AI companies that are building them, that is what they're there to do, is to figure out how to do it. Agents, by narrowing that focus, I think is a big advantage, versus AGI or something, or some dream that is just going to do everything for you, which is harder to imagine.
And that was the interesting, how fast that shifted from that AGI, right? That idea that there would be some general system that would solve everything to the agentic systems that we're looking at. Because I think what's going to happen is I think the AGI was almost dystopian in that there's something that's going to rule.
Some
something.
omnipresent thing that knows all.
Yeah, know all and can do all, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is we're seeing all of these very purpose-built agents that are coming out, and they're targeted, and they need to be managed, and it's actually, you can see how these things are going to manifest instead of this, a science fiction version of this thing that it may happen, but
we're just evolving microservices architecture.
Exactly, yeah. It's a microservices approach to, or how AI would manifest with microservices.
Well, and it's also very much like the history of AI is that all over again, right? They're always a big concept, a new platform, perceptrons come out, everybody thinks it's going to do everything, and then they realize it can't do everything, it can barely do one thing. So they focus on that one thing, and they get it to work really well, and then, all these magical things happen, and they move on to the next one. So in some sense, it's not that surprising. But what is amazing is the kind of language aspect of what's coming out now, which I personally, I'm shocked that it actually can do the things it can do around language. That's what I studied when I was a student, was natural language processing. And the types of things that it can do today were problems that I honestly didn't think would be solved. Summarization, question answering, even if it's wrong sometimes, just the fact that it's wrong in such a natural way is amazing. And so harnessing that interface aspect is more a human-computer interaction innovation than an AI innovation in some ways. I think is where it becomes you can, Adobe can take it and make a complicated product super easy to use. Stuff like that is going to happen.
It's interesting because you mentioned AGI and you mentioned kind of the progression of things, and so I just on a little tangent here, but if you've seen, I think OpenAI has probably done that most notoriously, but the 5 phases of AGI is kind of what the progression looks like, and some of it you can draw a linear line because it makes sense because you can say, okay, well, chatbots gave way to reasoning engines. That these things can now do chain of thought and reflection, and now because of this we can now do agents because they can now be powered to do these things, and we give them tools and all of that. Well, the next level 4 and 5 are interesting because 4 is this concept of innovators. It's almost like when do these things start having Einstein moments? And if you think of Einstein, back in the days that he was doing his work, people couldn't even begin to comprehend how is it that this person is coming up with these theories with the tools that he has at the time. And so and I don't know what it is, maybe you would know, but at some point we flip this bit and suddenly it becomes, because today they only really know what they've been told and what they've been shown to some extent, right? And yes, they'll make things up, but they're not coming up with their own profound theories, but at some point, we get to that place. And some say it's in the next 12 months, but who knows, it's the hype.
They've said that for the last
They've
5
said
years.
that, yeah.
We said 12 months for the past 5 years. There we are. No, I think what he's saying is quite interesting in the sense that without ChatGPT, so kind of generative AI democratization, kind of a general purpose model. So it can do a bit of everything with kind of the issues that you raised in terms of hallucination. And what you seem to be saying is that with agent, we keep the good part of kind of the natural language models and the use of language or large language models, but because we're narrowing it down, it means that's kind of those issue of mistake, because we all have either the bunch of lawyers who've decided to ask ChatGPT for precedents, and then you just say that doesn't exist, therefore you're in trouble, or Air Canada, who basically told the client, you can have a free flight, or no, it was our agent. Well, you're still liable. And I think everybody in the room is basically saying, well, I don't want that to happen to me at all. So are you really saying that the move towards agent, because it's based on that platform of generative AI, but with kind of a narrower focus, does that mean that, one, we should stop thinking of, I guess, generative AI being kind of a multi-purpose technology? Yes or no? I can be wrong. Or two, is it kind of the way to go? Because if you implement it properly, and you can tell me how you implement it properly, that means that the chances of hallucination, wrong answer, telling your clients the wrong things is drastically being lowered. Who wants to go first? So I've scared you of my long-winded question.
I'll jump in on that. I think the reason, so the general technology being so interactive, I think it really does change, and it's changing the way we interact with it too. And an agent, I loved, I think it was in an earlier session, who was it? It was Sebastian or no, you did, with the drawing the agent and talking specifically about the memory that the agent has, the short-term and long-term memory. once you have these memories, all of a sudden something switches. And the agent becomes the same way we interact with, I would say, like an intern. This is why I love the intern concept. An intern comes to you, hopefully, with the skill sets that you would need them to do the job, but zero context. They don't know, even where the kitchen is, right? But you start working with them, and hopefully, we know how to work with an intern. We know that they don't know where the kitchen is. We know they don't know where the source code is. We know they don't know the context. And so we work with them to provide that context. That becomes the memories. And as Raji called out this morning, those memories are going to help understand where the errors happened, if there was a hallucination, if it was an API they called that failed, whatever it was, it's going to start to reason through these and build these memories. I was talking with someone, and they have this crazy story where they have an agent, and the agent came back and asked for a colleague's email. And they're like, what just happened? And so the agents that they build record their logic. Like, did this step, did this step, did this step. The agent went and figured out, so these agents, they give them the ability to log into systems, which is also very interesting. So they even have like mobile phone numbers, so they can do two-factor authentication. It's crazy. It's scary. But what he found out was that he was looking through essentially a set of drawings, and they found out that the author of one of the drawings had the information for a different project for what the request was, and they needed access to get to the other drawing. And they knew to do that, they had to send an email to this person. And I mean, it was incredible that the system was trained to do this, or asked to do this, but it figured out, and they didn't program it to go figure out to ask for an email address. It knew how to log into systems, and it knew it was missing a key piece of information, that key piece of essentially the email, and it knew that it couldn't get access to the system, and the person was the person who supposedly could give them authorization. I don't even think the person could give them authorization. But the fact that the agent got to that, which was super impressive. And it's the same thing, again, with an intern, right? You ever have an intern or employee come and they say, hey, here's where I got to. And you're like, what? That makes no sense. How did you get there? You ask them questions, right? You engage with them. And then all of a sudden, once you see the logic behind what happened, you're like, oh, I know it wrong. And then you give them another piece of information, and you send them on their way, and then they go to do the job again. And now they do it, but now they do it with that logic. And they hold that memory in place so that they can do it again. That's why, so it's that context for what was successful, what wasn't successful, how do I drive, and how do I apply that next time?
I think that's interesting. Sorry.
So you're basically saying that the two things that it mostly do is that, one, it's less of a black box that it was, and two, it kind of remembers what it does. Are you saying that's kind of the two main things that we will see with agents? Yeah,
well, well, hopefully with agents, they're not going to be a black box, right? They're going to share, like, here's what I did, and it's going to make sense, right? They're not mystical, right? That's the thing, is that, but yeah, the memories are what's so important, and the memories are relevant to the jobs we ask it to do. It's relevant to the scope that we're working in, which gives it more power, because if you want it to have memories of everything, it's going to weight. How does it weight things, right? Just like, that's why personalization, on web searches and all these things, they're essentially, those are memories, right? They're things that are relevant to things that I do. And that's what's going to happen with agents, is that they're going to have the memory that sets the context, that highlights what the agent was built for, instead of being this general purpose, right? We all get sort of democratized to nothing.
Okay, Michael.
Oh, I was just going to jump on that one. First of all, I'm not sure they're not mystical, personally. I don't know what's going on in there myself. But I'll say, I think that's interesting, and the memory component that kind of expands on the agent's knowledge, like this idea of an intern that you have to, tell it where the kitchen is cool. I do think there's a limitation to that, though, in the sense of building expertise, right? I think an intern that you're training on how to do their intern job with context is one thing, but something that happens for us with our customers is they want agents that have construction expertise, that know about construction. And there are real limitations on what you can get out of AI, in that context. Even in the world of, large language models and, learning everything off the internet. The truth is like you could learn everything off the internet. You're still not going to be an expert in construction and how to do stuff. A lot of that stuff isn't written down. A lot of it is based on the real physical world. And this is an area that we work on a lot, and I think is the role of companies when it comes to domain knowledge and expertise in general, is to come in and take these very general models and figure out how to make them expert at what they need to be. And it's not easy. And I think, it's not just about hallucinations and stopping hallucination, but also, training it, not necessarily just by interaction, but sometimes you actually have to go in and train it and fine tune it sometimes to get it to actually be able to do the things that you want it to do. I think trying to do that in an AGI way is, kind of mind-numbing, but when you tackle it agent by agent for particular things, I think that's like you have a chance.
There was you just mentioned kind of the real-world stuff, and you've probably all seen in videos, world models and where they're going with that, and it's this wild concept. But the thing that really struck me as you're talking about this is they created this whole concept of like a robot gym. You probably saw this.
Yeah.
Where they're like literally putting these agents into virtual spaces that they can simulate and they can iterate over and over and over and over. So almost like they're going to school to get ready to perform their job.
Yeah.
So yes, you can get up and running with a little bit of some system prompts and some goals and some direction and say, here's your grab bag of tools. But I don't know, maybe we'll see virtual gyms in the future. Like you can take your agent to them and prepare them for the real world.
Well, eventually they'll have to get into the real world, like with self-driving cars, right?
Yeah.
Simulation and virtual driving was a big way that they got, as far as they did. But then in the end, they got to drive around San Francisco for a while, and everybody's got to be free.
Well, and those gyms, that's what you're talking about with building new models, right? I remember, I think early days, I think it was even Amazon, were showing us what they can do with image recognition, and we were saying the conversation was interesting because they said, look, we can identify all the objects in this street scene. I think it was like there's a person and there's a car, and we're like, our customers care there's a crack in the concrete.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's a different way of looking at the world, and there's not one other way of looking at the world. There's 1,000 other ways of looking at the world for what you're trying to do. To your point, when someone looks at something, what do they need, or what is the context they need to get out of that?
Yeah.
And that's where I think building these models, that becomes that school or the gym that we need these agents to work in. And I think you're right, is that we need to build those models as well. I know internally at Autodesk we're working on building a lot of models based on just the what Autodesk customers do. How do we understand things more graphically, more visually? How do we understand what an object actually is? And there's a difference between seeing there's all the things, right? There's conceptual design, right? There's the thing we design, then there's the thing that actually happens in the real world, and those all have.
Yeah.
And I'd say too, like to state the obvious, that this whole space is completely fluid, right? And like even there's no right answer. There's just kind of what works thus far, and you're seeing all these evolving patterns emerge of like the simplest of like I have a single agent with a single tool to like I have a supervisor who works with a team of agents to like I have this meta agent that has access to this giant grab bag of tools that could be like in the hundreds of tools, and I'm going to use semantic search, some of it Raji mentioned today, to pick the best tool. And so it's probably going to be a culmination of all these various design patterns for specific use cases over time, and we'll have to deploy.
I really like the example when you mentioned that everybody has a different way of looking into the world, and you say image recognition, somebody wants to see the crack on the road and somebody wants to see that. And I think that kind of wants to bring me into maybe to discuss a bit more the last 10, 15 minutes that we have in terms of discussion. In terms of the actual use case that we're seeing, in the sense that sometimes with AI, we tend to have the feeling that you need to do something special, new, extra. But a lot of time it's about making something that you have to do but you don't really want to do easier. So maybe I kind of want to open it up and kind of have you guys explain to me or tell me some of the things that you've seen in the sense that, we used to have an employee spending a week, a month doing that, and thanks to AI, he spends a day a week or 1 hour a week, therefore he can do plenty of other stuff. So I'll open it up to you.
I have I wish I could remember the name of the company. They're an Australian company, and they do this. They're in the room. Let me know your name again. I forgot. They do this job where they look at wastewater lines. And so wastewater lines, they have a lifetime, and they have this job where you drive this little car, it looks like, down the wastewater line, and it has a little camera and a light. And they're looking for cracks, like roots that have grown through the pipes or something like that, where the wastewater line needs to be fixed. And the job was for actually a civil engineer to sit there and watch just hours and hours and hours of this car driving through a pipe where you can only see some depth of field. It seemed just mind-numbing. And they would do this for 8 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours a day, looking for something. And when they find an issue, a potential issue, they would go and they'd mark it, right? It's whatever many meters from some marker. And so what they do now is they drive the car and they don't look, the person's not there, and they just use essentially, machine learning to be able to find the potential issues. And now the engineer goes and looks at all the marked spots, and they say, oh yeah, that's an issue, not an issue. And they do the whole job that took them just days and days of just boring work. And now they can do it, really, really fast. These are the kind of things that are just, you're reducing things that take a project that would took a person forever. Now all of a sudden that person spends, hopefully, a couple hours to be able to identify and, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have lots of examples of that, I think. But kind of interesting ones are, or kind of a corollary of that is less one that people do, and it takes lots of time, but more people don't do it because it just takes a little bit of time, right? So like a use case for us is taking a photo of like an issue on a job site and pinning it to where that issue is on the floor plan. Hugely valuable data to know I took a photo and this is where it is. Because you could imagine taking a photo and then just a couple days later, it's just in the mix of all your photos and it's lost, it's useless. But having it pinned in that location is this like critically important piece of data. And the vast majority of people taking photos on their cell phone are not gonna do that because it's just, like 30 seconds more time, but 30 seconds times 1,000 photos that they take over the course of that project, and so it's not done. We have, AI technology that can do that. When you have that, it now puts that data in there and makes the data that they have infinitely more valuable and useful in the future. But you're really like saving like a couple button clicks when you think of it that way. But that kind of magnifies over time. So, I mean, I think in some sense that's what AI is all about, is solving these types of little problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would maybe add too, just generally speaking, what I saw in the very beginning when, late 22, early 23, when everyone was, we're kind of chasing generative AI, there was such a propensity for customers in every conversation. It was this immediate like, how do I make money from this? How do I completely change my business? And because they're getting board pressure, and what does this mean? And driven for good or maybe not so good reasons. That's probably not the greatest headspace to be in as far as trying to, how do I apply this technology, figure it out, learn it. And so like anyone who jumped to that quadrant of something that was an external facing, customer facing thing, net new to the world, and like that's where we're gonna obsess over in the beginning, is just a really hard place to be successful. And what we found a lot of customers doing, even the ones who tried that, even if it were a few weeks, let's pull this back into looking at what are the problem spaces that are here and now that we know, and we know that are costing money, or there's a lot of people that are involved in this thing, and it's an internal-facing use case where the risk is a bit more minimized. And those are the customers who quickly realized, okay, we know how to use this technology, we can build a platform, we know how to actually manage this thing, we know how to scale it, we've built up all of our operations to be able to do this at scale, and it can now serve customers with it. And so that was just, I think, that pattern was repeating itself with every single customer that we were actually spending time with.
So you would say, best to start small, understanding what it can do, and then build it up and scale it up instead of trying to basically have the most sophisticated, advanced AI platform if you've never used technology before.
Yeah, I mean, look, to each his own. I think it's a think big, start small kind of approach. But I do believe, and I think Raji kind of alluded to some of this as well too. Like, there's going to come a point where this is not going to be optional any longer. Right, and if you listen to like Brett Taylor from Sierra, he was co-CEO of Salesforce. He's on the board of OpenAI. He makes some comments to this effect of like, in the early 2000s, go back in the Wayback Time Machine, and if you remember, if you didn't have a website, in the early 2000s, your business like quite literally didn't have a digital presence. And I remember moving to San Francisco back in like 2002 and calling my friends back home, having a laugh going, you're not gonna believe it, like the restaurant down the street, it has a website. This is so crazy. And like something we would just take for granted now. And so if you flash forward to the mobile eras of the iPhone, like 08, 09, and suddenly, you know, there's this proliferation of this mobile economy now. And if you didn't have an app in the App Store, you had no mobile presence. And so as these interfaces are changing, and we're all seeing this, and this is where I think the big unknown is where's the interface gonna come now? And if we work backwards from that, what is it going to start to look like? And we see this happening, right? Like we see Perplexity is being very vocal. They're building a browser. And OpenAI has plans to go build a device, and they also want to go fight Google over Chromium. And so like, there's a little interface war that's starting to sprout up. And what that point happens, and literally it's the vision that you saw Raji lay out. If I'm just having a conversation and all these agents are doing things and orchestrating things, the risk then becomes real of disintermediation if we become so reliant on, you know, point and click and use my app. Even ad serving platforms and ad serving networks will totally transform. And I hate to think though that there could be a world where you're having a voice chat trying to do some things and it's like, I don't know, sorry Ben to interrupt you, but I brought you this ad. It's gonna feel like, you know, FM radio all over again. So I don't, that's like a Dark Mirror episode. I don't know, I don't wanna go there, but.
I know you said you want this, but here's another option.
Yeah, exactly.
I just order it for you and send it to you without even asking.
Exactly, so I do think we cross this chasm at some point where people now's the time to figure it out. You know, and as we say, it's kind of a cliche saying, it's like, you know, you fix the roof when the sun is shining. And I think the longer people wait to figure this out and understand what does this mean for me and how do I kind of get ahead of this, you could incur some risk.
I think there's an interesting thing to think about there too, is I think also the world is changing and our customers are changing.
Yeah.
And so to that point, and they're changing little bits at a time, and the pace in which they change, you know, there's the innovator's dilemma, right? Is I'm going to give the customers what they're asking for, but when they start to change the way they approach things, so right now you're right, you know, it's point and click, that's the way everything is done, and now it's oftentimes it starts to be novel to do something, you know, in this space, and then when does, you know, okay, I no longer actually search for
There's
things.
no going back.
There's no going back, and it's going to be it's going very fast, but it's the way the customers think about solving their problems.
This is more of a macro example, right? But it was leaked, whatever. I assume it's credible. But for the first time in 20 years, right? Google has seen a measurable drop in search traffic in like a 2 or 3 month time period. Yeah. I mean, that's never happened, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
We just for years have gone, I'm going to go to the search box, type this thing in, and now it's completely starting to change human condition and behavior for something that we've been doing for 20 years.
Does that please you, Amazon? No, don't have to answer that. No, I mean, we've got 4 minutes to go, and I kind of want to kind of maybe finish it up in terms of, if you were to give one piece of advice to everyone today in terms of starting on that journey, what would it be? Michael, if I want to start with you, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think there's lots of pieces of advice. One I would say is just start experimenting, you know, right away. Start trying things out. I think don't expect everything to work exactly as you want, but now is the time for experimentation. Like you were saying, these are the earliest days. Somebody gave me an analogy I really liked. I think I mentioned it earlier, that this is like the time when the steam engine was first invented. The steam engine, it was invented, everybody saw it, and for, you know, a little while, like, it didn't actually have an immediate impact in the way that AI is having, as people tried to figure out what to do with it, make it small enough for a train or big enough for a ship, and kind of all these different approaches. And you just have to keep trying and experimenting with these things to see what fits. I think everybody can tell immediately the steam engine was going to revolutionize how everything worked. And AI is very much like that as well. But I think we're still in the experimentation phase of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't echo anything too dissimilar to that. So maybe if anything, I'll try to add to it. We have a leadership principle at Amazon, which is called learn and be curious. And it's very in the ethos of the culture, and I think that's, so +1, like experiment, get your hands dirty, start using it. But I think recognize and realize that the world is just, every day the ground is moving underneath us. And what is true today is likely not true tomorrow, and today's tech innovation will quickly become tomorrow's commodity. And so we have this fun challenge for those of you who don't idle well or get bored easily, to try to keep staying ahead of this curve. And so the frameworks are evolving. I mean, literally the stuff I shared in the last meeting with Google's A2A and MCP, that's hours old information that hopefully you'll read more about in the press this week. But it's always something else. I would say too, though, even just reflecting back, we've talked a lot about these kind of paradigm shifts, and I was talking about automobiles earlier if you were in the room. But even if you looked at if TCP/IP, if you will, unlocked the internet, if you will, and that was like the unifying protocol and gave way. And you go back and you watch videos of people trying to explain what the internet was going to do and how remarkable it was going to be, and like they couldn't get past the concept of email, right? And if we look back on it now, I think we can clearly see the transformative aspects. And so I would say treat it very much like this moment. It's easy to be a cynic, and it's easy to say, yeah, but it's hard, and yeah, but this, and yeah, but we've seen this movie before. And at the time, 1999, I think it was, the most valued website on the internet was something like pets.com. Mm-hmm. And boy, how much has the world changed. And so we're living in that same moment. And so I'd say, be open-minded and learn and be curious.
Who would imagine a bookstore would turn into...
there you go. There's another good example. Who knew?
Yeah, so I ditto. I mean, I think that's the thing is to be a part of the change, be a part of it. I think there's, personally, I always think, and for all of us, there's this moment when we all of a sudden go, oh, I see now. And it's like, I think it's anything, there's anything we do, whether it's, working on something, in a shop or learning a new skill. It's the learning and the experience that unlocks the exploration in your imagination about what's possible. And I think this is a space where, I think it's going to be people are going to, the things we're talking about, is that the email of the internet, right? Not understanding how we're going to fundamentally transform the way we all work in a connected way. I think, it could be.
And the thing I would add and close with is the fact that you're all here in this room now and we're having this conversation means that you're likely further ahead than the overwhelming majority of people. And not to, to speak honestly for Autodesk too, and having spent a time with a lot of customers, you guys in your thinking and where you're going and direction and some of the stuff that we're working on are well ahead of most too. So you guys are all in a good place for it.
Yeah, internally we feel like we do feel the pressure, but you're right. We've been looking at AI for a long time. We're looking at what does it mean. Sort of the thing we internally look at is we always reflect. There's these changes, these things that are going to happen in the future, these possible futures, based on technologies and what's coming, and always we want to look at what does that mean for the industries that we serve? What does it mean for our customers? When do our customers get there, and how fast can we go? And there's times I think where we've been too fast, and the customers were maybe they were confused. And there's times where I think we're too slow, and it's always trying to tune that dial to figure out where do we need to meet the customers where they're at, or how do we meet the customers where they're at. And with these technology shifts, that's always going to be the case because the customer is going to continue to move, and we need to move in lockstep with them to continue to be successful. Or that will be the downfall. I think that will be not staying in lockstep will be the downfall of or the success of our future.
The timer is flashing red, so this is all we have time for. Thank you very much to you three, Michael, Andy, and Ben, for a fantastic conversation. So thank you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.